rise of Blizzard Entertainment. An interview with Alan Adham, who's a co-founder. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
My whole life, the most fun thing that I know to do is to make and play video games. I tried to recruit basically anybody at UCLA who was really good at comp sci into this harebrained idea that a bunch of kids were going to go start a computer company. I had $11,000 left over in my college fund, and I took that 11 to start Blizzard. Mike borrowed 11,000 from his grandma. And
dude, you can just feel the passion in this startup, which was Blizzard from what, 20, 30 years ago, 40, something like that. You can just feel the passion. It's just like, yeah, we had to borrow money, man. Like, I just took it from my school loans and we just sent it. Like, that's not like, you have got to want it if you just like full YOLO all in like that, man.
Blizzard started with $22,000 and we never took another penny.
Alan Adham is quietly one of the world's most prolific game developers.
Sick.
It's unimaginable to think that one person could have their fingerprints on so many iconic franchises like Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, and Overwatch. I had an hour to spend with Alan just weeks after he stepped down from his role as Chief Design Officer at Blizzard Entertainment, the company he founded with Mike Morhaime and Frank Pierce nearly 30 years prior. Despite having an endless list of questions related to the games he's produced, I wanted to focus the conversation on the lessons he learned along the way, his philosophy behind making games, taking risks, and creating a legacy of beloved franchises. This is Win Conditions.
Sick. This sounds really good, dude. I'm excited for this. Okay, informational purposes only.
I want to start a conversation asking you about everything before your time at Silicon and Synapse and before Blizzard, and really growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, not to date you, but what was your childhood like in the environment that you grew up in?
Yeah, so I grew up in Los Angeles in Southern California, of course. My parents both are born in Cairo, Egypt. And so I'm first generation. Both my parents came to the United States to study for their PhDs. My parents moved the family from Los Angeles to Orange County, Irvine, which is where Blizzard is located still to this day, to start a preschool. And so it was the only town in all of Southern California that would give them the license to start a preschool because they had no experience. And back then, Irvine was this little kind of Orange Grove town with zero population. Just the amount of luck that it's taken to, get to this stage is pretty crazy. I'm incredibly thankful for all of it.
How do you think your parents influenced you early in your career? And
yeah,
I like how he mentions that. Like, there always is like a degree of luck, There always has to be that element of just like right place, right time, and things worked out. And if things went a little bit differently, then everything else would change,
How they influenced some of your inspirations.
So my father's an engineer. He's a principal engineer, civil engineer, specialized in earthquakes. And my mother's an entomologist, which is the study of insects. I have two brothers.
Okay.
The three of us were a full-time job for her, and she realized she liked taking care of kids more than taking care of insects. And so it was really her idea to start the preschool, and my father designed it, and they built it. And so they supported me in this crazy idea that one day I was going to start a video game company, and they never discouraged me from it, which was pretty amazing. I don't think a lot of parents would have listened to their, 14, 15, 16-year-old kid talking about starting a video game company and taking it very seriously.
That's awesome, especially back then. What is that, the 70s maybe? And like video games in the 70s, bro. What did you have, like Pong or something? Like maybe not even, like, bro. Like that's quite a wild idea back then, right?
Oh, so you had that premonition early on, 14, 15, and 16. You're like, Atari's great. I love playing games, and I want to start a games company one day.
My favorite book was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So I used to dream, when other kids were talking about being firemen and being astronauts, I wanted to be a candy maker, mostly so I just eat a lot of chocolate. And then around 14, 15, I think I was a freshman in high school, I saw a friend had a TRS-80 and another had an Apple II. And I managed to talk my father into buying us a home computer so we could do our homework, which of course we
so he could do his homework. Okay, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You need to learn, you need a computer so you can learn, so you can get better grades, so you can get a better job. I mean, it makes mathematical sense that you have to buy a computer for the family. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get that.
homework,
I get that.
yeah, homework, right? And so from that day forward, I was just fascinated by computers and programming and games. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. By just sort of good fortune, there were a group of us in high school and junior college, a little kind of gamers club. And we would get together and talk about games. And just between us and our audience, we might even swap games once in a while. And Brian Fargo was in that group. Brian then started Interplay. And so I had a front row seat as a friend of Brian's to seeing him start Interplay and grow Interplay into one of the best game development companies at the time in the country. They were making games like Bard's Tale, I think, one game.
I find it really fascinating. So Interplay, I guess, was pre-Bethesda. I didn't know that. I find it fascinating, like, if you study McDonald's and In-N-Out, they started within like a year of each other, both in California, and they took like obviously wildly different paths, but they're both wildly successful. And like you look at something like this, like Bethesda or Interplay, I guess I should say, and Blizzard starting so closely in the same town, in the same, it's like you start thinking about it, it's like what are the chances that actually happened that way, or was there something going on there at that time? It seems a little bit more than just luck. Like, why not someone on the East Coast or somewhere in the middle of the country or in Europe or like something else, but all there in LA at that same time in the same years, It's interesting to consider.
Dragon.
Yeah, they like all influenced each other and had this like hive mind like experience, right? I think Think and Grow Rich, the book, talks about that. Like, you have this hive mind and you can start bouncing ideas across each other, and then you keep these ideas within this hive mind, then it starts to grow, and like everybody else is just like left in the dust because they don't have that compounding experience.
Wars, and they had a few others that were just amazing, Castles and some other things. And I would play test on the weekends, and then by the time I was a junior in high school, I started writing code as a part-time job, sometimes after school, sometimes over the summer, for Interplay. So and then I went to school at UCLA, computer science, and that's where I met Mike and Frank. There's some funny stories about how we all met, and a couple others we don't talk about as often. Pat and James, also comp sci from UCLA. They graduated later, but joined us. There are even a few others. I tried to recruit basically anybody at UCLA who was really good at comp sci.
Cool.
I were maybe 10. I managed to talk 5 into joining us, into this harebrained idea that a bunch of kids were going to go start a computer company. We got to ride this beautiful wave, which none of us could have foreseen.
Oh man, this is a great start to an interview, man. We're only 5 minutes in.
How I met Mike is a crazy, crazy story. Kind of knew each other peripherally from classes.
Look at that, dude. Look at that hair. Look at the hair, bro. He's got the DP. He's got the computer. My guy is vibing. Look at that. That's just pure passion. He's just vibing out, smiling, doing his thing, baby.
We had together, but didn't really know each other. I didn't know his name and vice versa. We were sitting in a lab coding and happened to be sitting side by side. And I got up to go get a cup of coffee, ended up bumping into some friends and talking. Well, before I left, I locked my computer using my password. And when I came back, I sat down and I unlocked the computer and continued working. And Mike, this guy sitting next to me, I didn't really know, turned to me and he said, "How did you do that?" And I said, "What? You just lock it when you leave, you unlock it when you come back." And he says, "No, while you were gone, it timed out and I locked it using my password. How did you unlock it?" And I said,
"They have the same password? Or
what's your password?" And it turned out, by some crazy coincidence, we both were using the same password.
Bruh! Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Of like we were just talking about the McDonald's and In-N-Out story, and then like Bethesda and Blizzard. It's like some of these things. It's like, dude, it's like the Goku Vegeta. It's just like a little too uncanny, man. That is nuts. Unless they both use the password like password 123, then it's just like, bruh.
And so, like, to think that Mike and I, if that moment doesn't happen, maybe Mike and I never really meet each other. You know,
yeah,
maybe
true.
Blizzard never exists. It's kind of crazy.
So you get a chance to meet some of what turned out to be early founders.
Yeah.
Did you have to pull them into making a company together, or was that all a natural, like, yeah, this feels like the right thing to do?
You know, the business plan was pretty simple. It was, hey, we'll go make some video games. It'll be super fun. And if it doesn't work, we'll all be 22 and we'll go get regular jobs. That was
Yeah. I thought the same thing when I was going to become a streamer. I was graduating, you know, I was in my... I don't know, how old was I when I graduated college? I guess 22. And I was like, okay, I have two options. I can either like get a job with my degree. I had a couple offers on the table, or I could stream for considerably less money, right? Like a third of the money or something. And I was like, yeah, let's try to stream. That sounds like it would be fun. And if it fails, at least I can say I tried, and then like I can get another job in a few years and I'll still be like 24 or something. So that's not too bad. And that's if it fails. And if it succeeds, then I can do something I actually want to do for like the considerable future. So like the upsides were kind of there in both situations. Like, you know, this is probably just fine, right?
It was the entirety of the business plan. We would just run ads in the local paper, and, you know, college kids would come in, or high school kids would come in with, you know, sketches they'd written on the back of their homework. And it was so simple back then compared to how technical things are today. We would give them a pencil and a sheet of paper and say, like, draw a cool landscape with, you know, a human figure and a monster on it, and then leave the room and come back a couple hours later. And if the art looked good, it's like you were hired. When we hired you, the first thing you did on your first day was go to Home Depot and buy a $40 office desk and build it yourself.
I love it.
It was relatively easy to get started. And the fact that we were working as a port house meant we didn't need the capital raise. So again, by today's standards, getting started is pretty...
See, that's what's so good, man. They didn't even raise capital. They started with 22 grand and they built it from the ground up. It's like, I love that. I love that philosophy. It's like if something's good, then you make it, and if it's successful, then you start profiting off that thing, versus like, all right, let's take like 100 million of loans and try to make something really cool. And if it's good, then maybe you'll start making your money back eventually. And if it sucks, then you're mega in the red. Like, I don't know. I love that. It has to stem from passion that way, because, you know, you have small, humble beginnings, but then it's just like so vividly authentic that it's like you can just sense it in the game, right? It's like, yeah, build your own desk if you want to work here. It's like, all right, let's build something cool then, you know? I love it.
Be tough. I had $11,000 left over in my college fund, and my parents said, you know, buy a car, go to Europe, do whatever you want to do with it. And I took that 11 to start Blizzard. Mike borrowed 11,000 from his grandma, and Blizzard started with $22,000, and we never took another penny.
Dude, and oh gosh, that's so cool, dude. They started with 22 grand and never took another penny. Well, I mean, eventually they went public, right? And then when they went public, I guess there's shares and stuff. But like, yeah, that's still rad.
It feels like throughout everything you've said so far, there's been kind of a spirit to figure out a business using maybe some of your education, some of your network, some of your passion. But it feels like you were the person instigating a few of these key decisions. Like, what was that fire in your belly that you would say kept on driving you more than just like, hey, we play games, we're having fun, like, let's start a business? Was that just a pure desire to follow your passion?
My whole life, the most fun thing that I know to do is to make and play video games. I still, to this day, I probably play between 2 to 4 hours of games per day. That passion has been with me since that.
Once again, it's so cool. It's so cool. It's like he's playing games every day anyway because he likes to. It's not a game designer who isn't a gamer. It's a game designer who is a gamer. He gets it because he plays games. It's a real gamer making games versus someone who has never really gamed, coming in and leading a company, or someone coming in and just trying to make money but not actually a gamer,
Apple II Plus at 14 years old, and it's never left. So that's what's driven me. It's the art and craft of making the games that is so incredibly satisfying. And then, of course, the success that Blizzard's had over the years reinforces that. Because when you see like all the good that it does, the joy and the stories and the people and the relationships people who've met on World of Warcraft and other things and built lifelong friendships or even met their spouses.
Bro, I miss BlizzCon, dude. I haven't been in 5 years now because of COVID, and then my son being born last November, at the start of last November, and then this year it's canceled, so it's gonna be like 7 year hiatus for me, man. I can't wait to be back there. It'll be fun.
It's fun and it's pretty gratifying all at the same time, and it's creative and it's artistic. It's all the things you want. So for me, that passion comes from that.
The success you had early on with RPM Racing, Rock and Roll Racing, Lost Vikings, and then Warcraft, even at that point, was there a pattern that you were detecting in the way that you approached game design or principles behind how to make things? Because it seems so far you've taken risks, but most of them have paid off. What was that learning process like early on?
There's actually a repeatable sort of pattern that we use at Blizzard, and there's a repeatable set of design principles that go along with it. And they've evolved. They're not static. So if you look at our early games like Rock and Roll Racing and Blackthorn is another good example, and Lost Vikings, those are all really, really cool games, well-made games and really fun to play. But the truth is none of those really broke through or changed the world for us. It's Warcraft 1 setting the stage for Warcraft 2. And it's really Warcraft 2 is the first time that we kind of break through. This is one of our sort of secrets, right? How to make games that appeal to a casual or mid-core player, but also to a hardcore player.
That is a good quote, man, and it's not easy to do, right? Because the hardcore player, often wants something different than the mid-core and the casual. Counter-Strike tweeted something, and I won't be able to find the tweet. It's probably like many months old now, but they tweeted something, and I'm probably going to paraphrase this poorly, but it's something like, it's that magic when you first play Counter-Strike and 20 years later when you're still trying to like master it, but like you're getting better the whole time, and that experience of just coming back, right? I feel like when a game has that, your first time playing it grips you. And you can do it, you can understand it, it's not too complicated, but 20 years later, you're still trying to master it, right? So it's simplicity in its initial approach, but when you get to the point of playing it for 10, 15, 20 plus years, there's so much complexity in the simplicity that you're still trying to master. So easy to learn, hard to master, right? Not to simplify the quote more, but it's really tricky. It's a really, really tricky thing to nail, it seems.
At the time, the prevailing wisdom was you sort of had to pick an audience. And if you tried to make a game for everybody, then you would get nobody. And we rejected that notion. We thought, actually, there are examples. And the simplest, probably two, that we talk about, the canonical examples that we give at Blizzard to help people understand are chess and Go. Go is so simple, you can explain how to play it in 30 seconds. But actually, it's incredibly strategically deep despite its simplicity. And chess is the same thing. Yeah. Chess only has 6 piece types. You can explain the rules of chess in about 5 minutes to an 8-year-old, and then you can play. And then that 8-year-old could play every day for the rest of their life.
Right.
Strategic depth does not require complexity.
Yes! This guy gets it, man! We need Alan back, bro! Yes! Bro, one of the reasons WoW PvP was good is because it was so simple. Mages used Ice Lance and Frostbolt, and there wasn't Ray of Frost, Glacial Spike, Comet Storm. We cannot have that and have a good game, right? Especially when it comes to PvP, because this is incredibly important, like in chess, when you're fighting someone else. In PvP, the games have to be simple. They have to be. That's why Counter-Strike is so good. It's so simple, but so complex. That's why League of Legends is so good. It's 4 buttons, bro, but it's so complex, and that's how you make WoW PvP great. It's the simplicity is so critical. You have to have a few button rotations for the complexity to shine through, because the complexity with the positioning, the communication, the cooldown awareness, where to stand on the map, like all these different things matter, but it can only shine through with a very simple game that appeals to the newbies, that you can understand, watch as a spectator, but also come in as a newbie. Like, this is it, man. This is gold. This is so critical. We got to get back to this. Plunderstorm's another great example.
And the holy grail of game design are those rare gems where you find strategically deep games that are still simple.
Yep.
That lets you invite in casual and mid-core players and then graduate them up the sort of, strategically, the strategic curve until they're, hardcore. And so you see that echoing in all of our game designs. Paired with that is IP development. And so Lost Vikings and Blackthorn, cool IP, but they also weren't necessarily as well known as token high fantasy or what I'll call high science fiction. And so what we kind of figured out with Warcraft is, if we tap into this pop culture, sometimes we call it a common folklore. You see it in Warcraft and you see it in StarCraft high science fiction with space marines and bugs, and you can look at those as common tropes. Most people don't know that the Protoss are actually partially derived from the Roswell aliens. And so now we put our spin on them, but the big-eyed telepaths, with no mouth, right? You would go into a store and you would see a box sitting on a shelf in a sea of hundreds of other boxes. So you really just had a few seconds to sort of catch their attention. And by picking something that they kind of already knew, an orc or an elf or, a dragon or a space marine, you had a better chance that it would resonate as opposed to picking something, cool but random.
Going back to kind of the Warcraft 2 90s leading up to early 2000s, are these your ideas then to let's put in a cinematic, let's find the right artist to put on the box art, let's, make this thing bigger and, fill in the blanks for our audiences to really feel like they're part of this? Was that like a combination of yourself or finding artists or putting all these components together? Like, how did you actually have the wherewithal to...
Yeah. Someone in the chat said they played into themes that were big at the time. Yeah, we watched another video a few weeks ago that made that same connection. That was like, was it a coincidence that in the early 2000s, WoW took off the way it did when a lot of 90s kids were absolutely enthralled by Lord of the Rings, right? And medieval style shows and movies. Like, we had 300 and I don't know, there's multiple others I can't think right now. But kids in our era were just so excited. Then WoW was a way to live that virtually, right? You have Gladiator, I guess Harry Potter to some degree. Troy is the one I was thinking of. Yeah. So, and then WoW, you can then create a human warrior and live that thing that you saw on the screen. No, it's probably not a mistake or an accident. They totally played into that, right?
To put the recipe together.
Well, in the early days, I'm credited as executive producer on Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, and all the early Blizzard titles. Back then, executive production was a little like we would think of a film director today. A combination of organizing, of guiding talent, of strategic direction, of actual game design, a little bit of everything, right? And then by the time we get to World of Warcraft, roles start to stratify. The teams are larger, and so I think my credit on World of Warcraft is lead designer. That's at a time where the term game director didn't exist, but today we would call that game director. The truth of the matter is, as a director of a movie, you're surrounded by, the best films are made by teams of great people. And I was incredibly fortunate to have on my team, people like Metzen and Samwise and dozens of others, Mike and Frank and dozens of others, too many to name. And so no one person can take credit for all the things that we did. It was just this beautiful harmony of a bunch of, 20.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I want to see that picture again.
It was just this beautiful.
Bro, look, they're eating, what is that, pizza on like styrofoam plates with like a Dr. Pepper and a beer, like on the floor. They don't even have their desks built yet. I mean, bro, like that is legendary, man. I love it.
Harmony of a bunch of, 20-somethings and later 30-somethings that just really loved making games. And everybody brought their own magic, whether it was tech or
Gangster.
art or creative direction. It's hard to imagine us being as successful doing the things that we did without all those people.
Were you actively hiring these individuals, and did you have any principle around how you'd go about interviewing later in the stage outside of like finding artists to sketch, pictures?
Yeah.
How did that evolve over time to like grow teams and identify
Yeah.
super talented programmers or designers or artists? Like how did that change as you evolved through Warcraft?
I will say one thing, and this will give away a little bit of a secret on our dev teams. The icebreaker that I often use and many of us use is, so, tell me about some of the games you're playing these days. And it sounds like it's an icebreaker, but in many ways, for me, it's the most important question in the entire interview. And so I always thought part of, Blizzard's secret to, its early secret was that we hired gamers.
I mean, yeah. Like if you want that authenticity, you hire people that are gamers at heart. It makes a lot of sense. Like you don't hire necessarily like business people. You hire people that know the thing that they're making more than like the back of their hand. Well, if they're gamers, they probably would know the back of their hand pretty well too, because it like rests on the keyboard. But you know what I mean? Like they really understand these things, right? I actually worked at GameStop very briefly when I was 18. Maybe I was 17 or 16 when I was young. And in the GameStop interview, they asked me what games I played, and I told them WoW, that I played for a very long time. I wasn't Gladiator or rank 1 yet, so we couldn't necessarily like show off the titles and stuff like that. But I think it might have helped me get the job. I don't know.
Instinctively understood, and it sounds kind of silly, but if you want to make a game company, hiring gamers is probably a good idea. It's funny, but I would say now in the industry, it's very common to find lots of people in game dev studios that don't actually play games. They may be excellent engineers or excellent, in whatever their craft is, but don't play games. You risk losing a little bit of the magic if you do that. And the number of, thousands of cool little accidental inspired ideas that come out of those conversations, those accidental conversations, they go away if you're not all, hardcore gamers. And so that's, one of the secrets to our interview process is, as simple as it sounds, looking for people who really passionately love games.
The 30 of us here and 29 of us or so are in R&D. We're all fanatic game players, even our office manager, Christina. The reason we hired her, and she doesn't do any R&D, but the reason we hired her is because she owns her own Super Nintendo, not her brother's, or her boyfriend's. It's hers, and she plays the games.
In the span of your time from 1991 leading up to 2004, leading up to World of Warcraft, it didn't seem like Blizzard could miss.
Yeah.
Every IP from Warcraft to Warcraft 2, and then Diablo and StarCraft. Are there untold stories around actual risky projects where you're like, man, this thing could actually break the bank if this doesn't go well, and we bet the house on maybe one of these IPs or one of these developments that like maybe we shouldn't have, or it could have sent things the other way?
Oh yeah, behind the curtain. I have this presentation I give sometimes on how Blizzard incubates new projects, and there's a slide. It shows a picture of the Blizzard campus, with overlaid like a curtain, this beautiful curtain. And then the next slide is the curtain pulled back, and there's this clown, like a horror clown with a knife, and there's blood everywhere. And it's like behind the curtain, it's actually a horror show. And so we don't usually let people know that until they've joined, but the creative process is a chaotic mess. People generally know some of our more high profile sort of canceled projects, but in the early days, we were probably about 50-50. And so we would start projects with, a loose framework of what it is we thought we wanted to make, and then either pivot quickly because something better came along, or just cancel it because it wasn't fun. And so, you can Google images of things like Warcraft adventures. We thought it'd be cool to make an adventure game using the Warcraft IP. And it was around the time that adventure games, that genre was starting to sunset. And it turns out it's also really hard to write comedy like, Monkey Island.
We work with a lot of small teams that are in the process of going from 5 to 10 people to 20, 30, 40, 50. Can you talk a little bit about that process of scaling up teams, distributing responsibility for you, going from someone that was doing a lot of things to eventually kind of moving more into a more scaled role, like supervising others? Like, what was that like in that process?
It's hard enough to build one team to make one excellent thing, but then to scale that into 2 teams is incredibly difficult. And what you have to accept, and this I find it's still hard, even today at Blizzard, it's still hard. You have to be willing to risk taking some of the best people from the project that is currently keeping your studio afloat, what's paying the bills, and moving them on to the next thing. And that's really, really scary. And so
that
when
does
your
seem
directors,
really hard.
whether it's your art director, tech director, game director, to take them off your most successful project instead of working on the live game or on the next sequel and putting them on something new is incredibly risky.
Yeah.
It's risky in the short run, but if you think about it, if you just do the same thing over and over again, that's actually riskier in the long run. And so the beauty of that system is it gives their lieutenants then a chance to step into the director role, which is really good for them. It gives your highest initiative, most experienced, and most creative developers a chance to keep doing new things. And so that can make for a really healthy system. And then once you have 2, it's easier to get to 4, etc. So Blizzard today has a whole lot of teams spread across a bunch of different IPs led by a bunch of amazing people. And part of why we've stood the test of time and why we're here 3 decades later, still ourselves making great games, it's having the sort of courage to take your best and brightest and let them go off and do the new thing.
So when you're at the pinnacle of developing
that's
these
incredibly
games,
insightful.
these IPs, how did you continuously find inspiration, or did you have mentors at the time outside of Blizzard? Where did you go to if you needed to refill your energy as far as like innovation or creative spark? Would you go within games? Would you go to movies? Would you go into other businesses? Like, where were you drawing your creativity and your inspiration?
That's a good question.
Everywhere you look, whether it's a book that you're reading or a movie or a TV show, but even other places like I'll see song names and think, oh, what a creative title, or restaurant names and think, wow, that's a really cool name for a restaurant. And if you're creative, those inspirations come from unexpected places sometimes, right?
Yeah,
One of the inspirations for World of Warcraft was actually Animal Crossing.
Really?
Yeah. And so Animal Crossing, both in terms of how alive the world felt, and we wanted to capture that in World of Warcraft and make sure the world felt like a world, but also the real-time clock. And so Animal Crossing, the time in the game is the time on your system, and so it's real time. If it's dark outside, it's dark, and things close in-game. And if somebody had proposed that idea without having played Animal Crossing, it would just sound insane. I was playing a bunch of Animal Crossing while we were working early stage on World of Warcraft.
Cool.
And when I pitched that idea to the team, to a person, the team said, Alan, that's the stupidest idea ever. And I said, just trust me. And I had to we're probably about 40 people on the team at the time. I 1v40'd the whole team on real time and said, okay, look, I went to our server and
1v40'd the team in real time. I love it. Oh my God.
His name was Joe, and Joe Rumsey, he was amazing. I said, Joe, just put in the clock in a way that we can scale it. And if I'm wrong on this, we'll just make it a regular clock. He did it. And then, kind of one by one, people would come into my office over the next few days because we were playing, we were playing in our free time, our own game. And started at first with people walking in and them saying, I don't hate it as much as I thought I was going to hate it. And then it slowly turned into people saying, like, I was up early the other day with my newborn and I was sitting playing and I watched the sunrise over Westfall. And it was one of the prettiest moments in gaming I've ever had.
Yeah.
Inspiration comes from playing games and the rest of the world. But also, I always encourage our designers, and all of our developers to play on different platforms because you'll find inspiration and learn lessons. From mobile, you can take to PC and vice versa. And console,
very true.
There's so many amazing games out there, and each one of them has lessons to teach you, positive and negative, by the way. Sometimes you learn what not to do and what you don't like, and that can help save tons and tons of development time. People at Blizzard know I'm generally not a fan of prototyping. It's something that a lot of folks in our industry talk about. I'm generally not a fan of prototyping. My feeling is the world is full of thousands of prototypes that we don't have to build. Just go pick the games that are similar to what you want to make. Those are your prototypes, and then get on it.
So interesting. Yeah, we've had this conversation before a few months ago. I think it was about Apple. Like, Apple didn't make the first phone, but they made the iPhone. And Apple didn't make, I don't think, the first computer, but then, they made the MacBook and the Macintosh. And then they didn't make the first tablet, but they made the iPad. It's like you take an idea that's already there and then you create it. So instead of reinventing the wheel, you're just making a really good wheel that already exists. And it sounds like Alan has that same kind of concept. It's like, there's already a lot of great ideas out there. Let's pick one and polish the heck out of it and make it awesome for players. And that's a pretty insightful philosophy, right? Blizzard Polish for a long time has been like what they've been known for. Like that they have really, 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 really polished games. Okay, let's keep flying.
Well, I have to ask then, 13 years in, you're coming up with some early mechanisms of what would turn into an MMO, which is World of Warcraft, and then you leave Blizzard.
Yeah, what happened there?
If you're willing to say more, like, what was that transition like? And
yeah,
throughout your 10 years before returning, what were you doing?
Yeah.
Twiddling your thumbs and watching South Park episodes pontificate on World of Warcraft.
Well, it's an interesting story. So, you talked about where do you find inspiration, where do you go to recharge your batteries. So, one of the hardest skills, or one of the hardest things for me to learn, was how to scale and how to let go. The truth of the matter is I never really quite let go. And so game directing World of Warcraft while Mike and I were running Blizzard, those are two full-time jobs. And so I'd basically been working for 13 years, 7 days a week, and I would go to bed sleeping and thinking about the problems we were working on, design or otherwise. I found myself in my kind of early 30s, mid 30s, unmarried. I dated a lot, but I hadn't quite yet met my soulmate, my significant other. And I had met a girl, and I was pretty sure she was the one. And so we're married today. And so it all worked out. And I had it in my head that I needed to take a break and I needed to lock in this relationship.
What an absolute giga chat. He's got his priorities straight too with the family. He's like, you know what? This Blizzard thing, I love it. 7 days a week, 13 years. I gotta go see about a girl. Takes a break, sees about the girl. I love it.
And that's, that story's amazing. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. What I should have done was taken a sabbatical and then come back. And so I pretty freely admit, and I've said this before, I'm on the record, leaving right before World of Warcraft shipped was the biggest mistake of my life. Not just financially, but creatively.
Oh, no.
A year later, I found myself recharged and really missed the teams and the creative process. And We all understand now for the long run, work-life balance is a thing, sort of. For you startups out there, maybe not so much work-life balance.
Well, so he said in the long run, work-life, that's really intelligent. Work-life balance is a thing in the long run. If you talk to anyone who's done something great in the short run, that doesn't exist, right? Like you look at like Magnus, like world's greatest chess player, and you think about like work-life balance for him when he was grinding to be #1 in the world. It's like, no. You look at Blizzard and its infancy creating the Blizzard we know today. No, it's going to be 7 days a week, right? Like, no, you don't get work-life balance at the start when you're creating something special. Absolutely not, right? And Alan seems to understand. But in the long run, it's like eventually something's got to give. It's not going to work. So like in my life, I stream 7 days a week for close to a decade, and that work-life balance did not exist, clearly. When I met my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, but no, today my wife, I started streaming 6 days a week, and instead of streaming nights, I swapped to days, because I realized if we're going to ever go on a date, I need a day off. And when my son was born, I swapped to 5 days a week, right? And those changes had to happen eventually for life. And I always knew that. But starting, you can't start with, well, I want the weekends off and I want to work on this. It's like, no, you are all in for a while. And that's, it's like, well, that's the sacrifice of that's the cost of mastery, right? Often referred to as the cost of mastery. It's like, well, do you want this or not? Because this is what it costs. And most people obviously aren't willing to pay that cost. But if you are, and it's right, and you're passionate about it, and all the stars align, it's like, boom, baby, then it hits. It's a home run. But eventually you're going to have to dial back. That might be 5 to 10 years, 15 years down the road, which it takes a lot, right? And that's why most people don't do it.
Once you're stable, you've got a bunch of trusted developers that you're working with. Theoretically, you can build an organization that can do lots of great things without you having to work 7 days a week.
Right.
But early mode, I think you got to work really hard.
Yeah.
What I did during
Absolutely.
the time away is I started a quantitative hedge fund, which is kind of nuts. People go like, how did you go from games to a hedge fund? It turns out they're actually really similar in many ways.
Huh.
In my early career, I'd written AIs for things like, racing and rock and roll racing, or chess algorithms for battle chess, one of the games I had worked with Interplay on in college. And so I had always wondered if you could apply comp sci and AI to trading the stock market.
Oh my gosh.
And so I left Blizzard with the idea that I was gonna build a SQL warehouse, archive a bunch of historical financial data. I had already spent a decade reading all about Warren Buffett and Ben Graham and Peter Lynch. When we sold Blizzard in 1994, I necessarily had to learn how to invest. So as an engineer, you look at other people in a space, kind of look at best in class, and then try to replicate, what they're doing, and then maybe extend on it, right? And so I knew that it was real and that it could work. And I started this hedge fund then, which was another big fun game. And we did really well for a while. I didn't close the fund fast enough. 2016, it already starts, this sort of apocalypse of value fund investors. I think 2016, 4,000 or 5,000 value-oriented hedge funds shut down. And it's actually continued to this day. It hasn't stopped yet.
You're a fascinating person. Game design, quantitative hedge fund.
It's all a big game.
And then back to game design.
And then back to game design. So how did I go back?
Tell me.
Yeah. So Mike Morheim was one of the investors in the fund. And so when I sent the letter out, Mike and I talked. And, for me, I'd always dreamed of returning to Blizzard, but I had, committed and raised capital from friends and family. So I was on that other path, which was really fun too, actually. But Mike and I talked, and I think Mike said something like, we could use your superpower to help us start new things. That was the strength that I brought to Blizzard, and the funnest thing I know is building new teams, building new IPs, and making new games. And so often I would do that, And then, like with World of Warcraft and other titles since, I would get them either into production or over the finish line, and then step over to do the new thing, like we talked about with internal mobility. And somebody else would then do either the sequel, run the live ops, do the expansion sets. And it was a beautiful system that allowed me to move from game to game to game, and allowed lots of great developers at Blizzard to step into those titles, learn how to run them at scale, how to make amazing sequels or expansion sets, and then that positioned them one day to start their own thing. So it was perfect.
So it's almost like a founder in residence. You could come in, you could get things off the ground, you could coach teams up, and then you could go on and launch another kind of initiative or project within the company.
That's exactly right. And so Mike said, come back and do more of that. And I came back to Blizzard excited. I was very happy to be back. A lot had changed, of course.
Yeah, what were the biggest changes when you came back?
The biggest one industry-wide.
So it was like a decade-long sabbatical, and he comes back. I'm sure that was wild. Like, first day, it's like, hey, Alan. Oh, man. Like, that must have been crazy, dude.
This was that, teams were so much larger. When I left, we shipped World of Warcraft with about 60 developers. And the majority of the dev cycle, it was a 5-year dev cycle, would have been around half of that, 30 or 40 developers. And so, coming back to team sizes of hundreds, 300 and 400, and that was necessary because fidelity and scope had gotten larger, but also because of live ops, right? So World of Warcraft now had millions of players. We didn't get to make it in quiet isolation. You had to be working on the next thing even as you were making, live content. That's probably the biggest difference in game development from, the early days where you made a game, put it in a box, shipped it, maybe you patched it once or twice, and then you could move almost the whole team on to the next thing.
It's a whole nother skill set.
Totally different now. Really shipping the game. If you look at our team sizes when we shipped Hearthstone or Overwatch or World of Warcraft, our team sizes quadruple over time shortly after ship as you scale into the success and try to do all the things, live, esports, DLCs, expansions, and at the same time, maybe you're working on the next big numbered flagship sequel. That's a huge lift to do all at the same time.
And a huge departure too.
Makes sense.
When you said strategically deep but technically simple. I forgot the exact saying you had, but I feel like live ops and games that evolve over time almost go counter to the idea of the beautiful game that you try to make like chess.
They do, and we talk about that in our design principles within Blizzard. One of the things we talk about is that exact challenge. If you were the maker of chess and your boss told you make chess 2.0,
oh my gosh, I love this question. I can't wait to hear his answer. But one of the things that I realized about a decade ago is Call of Duty is fun, but every year they launch a new one. So if the best Call of Duty ever comes out, they're gonna launch a new one in the next year, because that's what is going to profit the shareholders, because it's a company, and that's how that works. And it's like, like when you realize that, it's like, crap. And then I realized the same is true with WoW. Every 2 years we get an expansion pack. So if WoW makes the best expansion ever, say War Within is the best expansion ever, we're gonna get a new expansion a year or two later. And that's a tricky thing. It's like, okay, make chess 2. That'll last 2 years. Then we're going to make chess 3. It's like, ooh. So a counter example to this is Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike has changed very little over the course of, has it been 30 years now? Of course, Source 1.6 and then Go, little changes. And then Counter-Strike 2, little changes, right? But it looks and feels very similar. Right? If you liked one, you'll probably enjoy the other. They're very similar, and they're very careful in what they change. It's not like every expansion overhauls absolutely everything. It's like, let's keep almost everything identical, but let's tweak this and see what that does. But let's keep everything else the same. And that's why 2 hours ago I said with Season of Discovery, it's almost like they're doing a lot. Like it could almost be like just classic with a new raid or dungeon, and like just see, like just the very smallest tweak and see where that leaves us. Like Wrath of the Lich King, almost almost a perfect WoW in a lot of senses. Like what if you started there and then just tweaked it, right? Instead of trying to overhaul the whole thing every 2 years, overhaul, new currencies, new systems, overhaul. It's like, chill. You have a winning recipe. The car is running. The wheel is great. Let's just slightly tweak it, right? Like the return to like valor and justice as and conquest as like the 3 currencies, and honor, I guess, like the 4. Like just streamlined, basic, good gameplay, slight tweaks. Right, and it's a very complicated thing, though, but it's something I've thought about for a long time. It's like, curious what he has to say here.
There are things you could make the board bigger. You could add new pieces. You could make the board 3D. Almost anything that you do to chess would make it a worse game. In fact, would make it more complicated.
Right.
And less accessible.
Yes.
So we try to teach at Blizzard then, as a game is in live operations for a long time, try to avoid increasing the surface area of the game, try to avoid just adding a bunch of new things,
right.
Try to avoid making it more complex, both to new players who are going to see your game for the first time 5 or 10 years after it's come out, but also win back. Often you have players that lapse and then will come back a year or 2 later. And you don't want them to bounce either, because the game has become so much more complicated.
Right. Well, that's the problem Hearthstone had, right? Like you quit for a while and come back and you don't know any of the cards at all. And it's like, wait, Hearthstone 1.0 was this beautiful thing, but now it's like, I don't know anything. So the bounce back is super low. Someone in the chat said, if you don't change, your game gets stale and you lose subs. I think part of that is true. Or I think that's generally a true statement. But just to push back a little bit, Mamba, a game like Counter-Strike is a great counterexample. It has barely changed for a very long time. What do they do for Counter-Strike? Maybe a small graphics update, maybe a new skin for a gun, right? Maybe I don't know, a new map or something, but like just the slightest things every now and then. It's not overhauls, and that's the clarification, we should probably have there.
Point, you've now left Blizzard.
Yeah.
And you've got a chance to get back to Blizzard, learn almost in some ways how to ship modern game titles.
Right.
Go through some of what we just talked about of like the new age of operating a live ops game, shipping multiple things at once.
Right.
What is exciting for you right now, particularly, and are you leading up to Alan's perfect game in the future, or what's getting you excited? Stepping away from a Blizzard that you've spent 30 years of your life.
That's right.
Creating.
I thought I was going to take a little time to just sort of reset and smell the roses, get healthy, do a little travel, all the same thing everybody else, clean the garage.
And now you're doing a podcast with me.
Right. And what's happened instead is it's been amazing, actually, the outreach from, companies, AI tech, gaming companies, interested in what I'm going to do next or how I might be able to help them has been really nice. And all of that without any real proactive effort on my part. And so it's opened my mind to some pretty interesting possibilities, and I might pursue some of those. And then at the same time, I've had games and new game types and been thinking about, game development since I was 14, and it's never stopped. And so I might try to recreate some of that early Blizzard magic someday and something new, but stay tuned. I'm not sure.
This gets me really excited.
That would be sick.
This gets me really excited. If I've learned
sick.
anything from you over this conversation, it is that you are extremely adaptive to things you perceive going on, whether in the game space, the financial space. You're always looking around the corner for what is truly at its core fun and exciting. And I don't think that really has left you at any point. It's just really the thing that will instigate an idea or the next creative vision that almost feels like you're on the precipice of finding?
Well, because I continue to play all the time, I'm always excited to play the kind of the cool new emergent games, and they're this amazing source of inspiration. So there's a lot of really interesting things happening today in the indie scene and in, maybe we call them mid-sized companies, things you see like with Helldivers or Pal World, things like that. Not what we would think of as traditional AAA games, but still really, really interesting and really cool. And so it's pretty fun to think about what that might look like,
Do you have any advice for a gaming company founder, designer, someone who can channel your early stage energy or any principled thinking that you wish you had this guidance when you're starting off building, the very first Silicon and Synapse or Blizzard?
Know your audience. Don't forget that what you're making is for your players, for your audience. In the ideal, your audience is you yourself. And if it can't be, make sure you're involving your community and testers and user research as early as possible, and be honest with yourself about that. Often we get enamored of a cool new technology or a cool new idea, our passion project, but that's not the right way to look at it. That really needs to be viewed as a means to an end, the end being serving your customers, and in our case, players. I think that's probably the most important thing that I could communicate in this sea of beautiful ideas and amazing, founders making cool things. It sounds obvious, but, make sure that you're making them for the people you think you're making them for, and stay close. Ideally, they would be yourself. So
that's great advice. Well, thank you for all this time.
It gets so incredibly complicated. Right? I mean, there's layers to this. Okay, satisfy your customer. Okay, well, how do you do that? Okay, well, let's ask them what they want. Okay, everyone wants different things. Okay, that's hard. Well, who should we satisfy then? Everyone on the forums are yelling at each other, and everyone on Twitter is yelling at each other. What does my customer actually want? Okay, let's try this and see if it works. Oh, we get crapped on family friendly for that. Okay, let's not do that. Let's try this. It gets complicated. So early Blizzard, I remember, had the philosophy of, we're going to create the games that we want. And just like Alan said, that works if it's organic and you guys are actually gamers. Because if you make the game you want and you're a organic gamer, man, from birth, it's like, okay, well, then your customer base is going to like it. But it doesn't work if that is not in alignment, because then you make the game that you want. If you're not really like your audience, then there's going to be some mismatch there. So I agree. It's hard to nail that, right? Clearly hard to nail that.
I feel honored to just have gleaned some of these insights and hear more of the stories of journey that you're on, and I wish you the best of luck, and I really hope that you end up building the game that Alan thought of when he was 14.
Thanks. This has been really fun.
Well, thank you so much.
Bro, that was probably my favorite React we've done, maybe ever, but at least in a long time. Like, this was such a joy to watch. Thank you so much for linking this in the Reddit. That was an awesome video. Someone posted it 6 days ago, and then someone posted it 2 weeks ago. So like, you guys are probably like, Xar, watch this, you moron. Like, you would love this. I kept putting it off because it was like 40 minutes. And I'm like, do I really want to? Yes, I'm so glad we did. That was an incredible interview. Oh my gosh. Let's go. That was me both times, was it? Well, thank you, Dame. Thank you. That was a great watch. Incredible watch. Cool. Cool.